Listen to a conversation.
Today, we're taking...
Hi, Professor Atkins. You wanted to see me?
Hi, Bill. Thanks for coming.
Hello there, family. If you're new here, I'm Ahmed Binbasri. I'm a translator, entrepreneur, and instructor. I help students to get professional skills, make money online, and make their life peaceful. In this video, we're gonna take a full practice test for TOEFL listening. 5 messages, 2 conversations, and 3 lectures. Before we start taking the test, I want to emphasize 3 points. Number 1, take notes if you know how to take notes. If you don't know how to take notes, then don't take notes. Number 2, if you're still struggling to understand some words in English, so your problem is with the TOEFL vocabulary. So I and Master Languages team prepared for you the top 180 words to help you excel in the TOEFL reading and listening. Finally, this schedule explains how to calculate your score when you finish the TOEFL listening section. Without further ado, let's dive in. Good job.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a university employee.
Hi, I need to pick up a gym pass.
Okay, I'll need your name, year, and university ID.
Here's my ID card, and my name is Gina Kent, and I'm first year.
Okay, Gina, I'll type up a pass for you right away.
Great. This is exciting. I can't wait to get started.
Oh, this is a wonderful gym.
That's what everybody's been saying. Everyone is talking about the new pool and the new indoor courts, but what I love is all the classes.
The classes?
Yeah, like the swimming and tennis classes and everything.
Oh, yeah, but this pass doesn't entitle you to those.
It doesn't?
No, the classes fall into a separate category.
But that's my whole reason for getting a pass. I mean, I was planning to take a swimming class.
But that's not how it works. This pass gives you access to the gym and to all the equipment and to the pool and so forth, but not when the teams are practicing, so you'd have to check the schedule.
But what do I have to do if I want to take a class?
You'll have to 1, register, and 2, pay the fee for the class.
But that's not fair.
Well, I think if you think about it, you'll see that it's fair.
But people who play sports in the gym, they don't have to pay anything.
Yes, but they just come in and play or swim on their own. But taking a class, that's a different story. I mean, someone has to pay the instructors.
So if I want to enroll in a class...
Then you have to pay extra. The fee isn't very high, but there is a fee. So what class did you say you wanted to take?
Swimming.
Okay, swimming classes are $30 a semester.
I guess I could swing that, but I'm still not convinced it's fair. So, do I pay you?
Well, first you need to talk to the instructor. They have to assess your level and steer you to the right class, beginner, intermediate.
You mean I have to swim for them? Show them what I can do?
No, you just tell them a little bit about your experience and skills so they know what level you should be in.
Oh, okay. So, I guess I'll need an appointment.
And I can make that for you right now. And then I'll type up your gym ID card. You'll need it to get into the building. Now, about that appointment, how does Wednesday at 3 sound?
Fine.
Okay, and you'll be meeting with Mark Giddis. He's the swimming instructor. He also coaches the swim team. And here, I've jotted it all down for you.
Great. Thanks.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
Yes, but they just come in and play or swim on their own. But taking a class, that's a different story.
What does the man imply when he says this?
But taking a class, that's a different story.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. The class has been learning about birds.
Okay, today we're going to continue our discussion of the parenting behaviors of birds. And we're going to start by talking about what are known as distraction displays. Now, if you're a bird and there's a predator around, what are you going to do? Well, for one thing, you're going to try to attract as little attention as possible, right? Because if the predator doesn't know you're there, it's not going to try to eat you. But sometimes certain species of birds do the exact opposite. When a predator approaches, they do their best to attract the attention of that predator. Now, why would they do that? Well, they do that to draw the predator away from their nest, away from their eggs or their young birds. And the behaviors that the birds engage in to distract predators are called distraction displays. And there are a number of different kinds of distraction displays. Most of the time, when birds are engaging in distraction displays, they're going to be pretending either that they have an injury or that they're ill or that they're exhausted. You know, something that'll make the predator think, here's an easy meal. One pretty common distraction display is what's called the broken wing display. And in a broken wing display, the bird spreads and drags a wing or its tail. And while it does that, it slowly moves away from the nest. So it really looks like a bird with a broken wing. And these broken wing displays can be pretty convincing. Another version of this kind of distraction display is where the bird creates the impression of a mouse or some other small animal that's running along the ground. A good example of that kind of display is created by a bird called the purple sandpiper. Now, what the purple sandpiper does is, when a predator approaches, it drags its wings, but not to give the impression that its wings broken, but to create the illusion that it has a second pair of legs. And then it raises its feathers, so it looks like it's got a coat of fur. And then it runs along the ground, swerving left and right, like it's running around little rocks and sticks. And as it goes along, it makes this little squealing noise. So from a distance, it really looks and sounds like a little animal running along the ground, trying to get away. Again, to the predator, it looks like an easy meal. Now, what's interesting is that birds have different levels of performance of these distraction displays. They don't give their top performance, their prime time performance every time. What they do is they save their best performances, their most conspicuous and most risky displays, for the time just before the baby birds become able to take care of themselves. And they time it that way because that's when they'll have made the greatest investment in parenting their young. So they're not going to put on their best performance just after they've laid their eggs because they haven't invested that much time or energy in parenting yet. The top performances are going to come later. Now, you have some birds that are quite mature, quite capable, almost as soon as they hatch. And in that case, the parent will put on the most conspicuous distraction displays just before the babies hatch. Because once the babies are hatched, they can pretty much take care of themselves. And then you have other birds that are helpless when they hatch. In that case, the parent will save its best performances until just before the babies get their feathers.
Why does the professor say this?
But sometimes certain species of birds do the exact opposite. When a predator approaches, they do their best to attract the attention of that predator. Now, why would they do that?
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
Most of the time, when birds are engaging in distraction displays, they're going to be pretending either that they have an injury or that they're ill or that they're exhausted. You know, something that'll make the predator think, here's an easy meal.
Why does the professor say this?
You know, something that'll make the predator think, here's an easy meal.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
Now, what the purple sandpiper does is, when a predator approaches, it drags its wings, but not to give the impression that its wings broken, but to create the illusion that it has a second pair of legs.
Why does the professor say this?
But not to give the impression that its wings broken.
Listen to part of a lecture in an architecture class.
Today, we're taking a little detour from the grand styles of public architecture we've been studying to look at residential architecture in the United States. Since this is something we can all identify with, I think it'll help us see the relationship between the function of a structure and its style or form. This has been an ongoing theme in our discussions, and we'll be getting back to it in just a moment. But before we get started, I want you to take a moment to think. Does anyone know what the single most popular style for a house in the United States is today? Bob?
I bet it's the ranch-style house.
Well, in this area, probably. But are we typical? Yeah, Sue.
How about the kind of house my grandparents live in? They call it a Cape Cod.
That's the one. Here's a drawing of what we consider of a classic Cape Cod house. These days, you see this style all over the United States, but it first showed up in the U.S. Northeast, in the New England region, around the late 1600s. For those of you who don't know the Northeast coastal region, Cape Cod is a peninsula, a narrow strip of land that juts out into the Atlantic. And so many houses in this particular style were built on Cape Cod that the name of the place became the name of the style. Now, why did the Cape Cod style house become so popular in the Northeast? Well, one reason is that it's a great example of form following function. We've talked about this design principle a lot, about form following function. And what did we say it meant? Someone give me an application of this principle. What does this concept that form should follow function, how would it be applied to housing design?
Well, if it means that the design of a building should be based on the needs of the people who use it, then, well, the architect has to be very practical to think about the people who will actually be living in the house or working in the office building, whatever. So for the architect, it's all about the users, not about showing off how creative you can be.
Good. Of course, for a Cape Cod house, it might be even more accurate to say that form also follows climate. Who knows what the climate's like on Cape Cod?
Cold in the winter.
And whenever I visit my grandparents, it's really wet. It's usually either raining or snowing or foggy, and windy too. I guess because it's so exposed to the ocean?
That's right. So take another look at this drawing, and you can imagine how this design might be particularly helpful in that kind of climate. Notice how the house sits fairly low to the ground. This relatively low, compact structure helps the house withstand the strong winds blowing off the ocean. And look at the slope of the roof. The steep angle helps keep off all that rain and snow that accumulates in the winter. Another thing, Cape Cod houses usually face south to take advantage of the sun's warmth through the windows. That's helpful in winter. Now, what can you tell me about the chimney? About its location?
Well, it's in the middle because does that have something to do with heating the houses? I mean, since the heat never has to travel very far.
That'd mean you can heat the house more efficiently, right?
Exactly. Now, see how the house has very little exterior decoration. And that's also typical of early Cape Cod houses. The wind was one reason, nothing sticking out that might blow away in the harsh weather. But there was probably another reason, not related to the climate, more a reflection of rural New England society back then. You see, Cape Cod houses were not built in the big cities where all the rich people lived back then. These were modest dwellings. The people who built them simply couldn't afford lots of expensive decorative details. But it was more than just a matter of money. In these rural areas, people depended on each other for survival. Neighbors had to help and support each other in a difficult environment. So you didn't want to appear to be showing off. You'd want to avoid anything that might set you apart from your neighbors. the same people you might need to help you someday. So all this helped to create an attitude of conformity in the community. And you can see why a modest, a very plain style would have become so widely imitated throughout rural New England.
It is plain, but, it's nice looking.
Good point. And in fact, it's precisely that aesthetic appeal, the purity, the nearly perfect proportions of the house, that's another reason for the Cape Cod's enduring popularity, even in places where the climate's so mild that its functional design doesn't matter.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Does anyone know what the single most popular style for a house in the United States is today? Bob?
I bet it's the ranch-style house.
Well, in this area, probably. But are we typical?
Why does the professor say this?
Well, in this area, probably. But are we typical?
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hi, Professor Atkins. You wanted to see me?
Hi, Bill. Thanks for coming. I wanted to talk to you about...
Is there something wrong with my research paper?
No, not at all. In fact, it's very good. That's why I wanted to talk to you.
Oh, thanks.
I think you know the department is looking to hire a new professor. Are you familiar with our hiring process?
No, but what's that got to do with me?
Well, Bill, we have several qualified applicants we're serious about. And as part of the interview process, we have them meet with a committee of professors and students in our department. They also have to give a talk.
You mean like a lecture?
Yes, like a sample lecture on one of their academic interests.
Oh, so you can see their teaching style.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. Makes sense.
So, I'd like to know if you'd be willing to join as a student representative on the interview committee. It'd be a good experience for you. You could put it on your resume.
Oh, that'd look good for my grad school application, I guess. So, what do I have to do?
The department secretary will give you a schedule of the applicants' visits. If you're free, we'd like you to attend their talks, and then later you can give us your opinion. Oh, and we usually serve lunch or snacks, depending on what time the talk is.
Cool. That's another good reason to do this. When's the next talk?
We actually haven't had any yet. The first one is next Friday at 10 a.m., then lunch and informal discussion with the applicant right after.
Oh, well, I'm free on Fridays. If all the talks are on Fridays, I'll be able to make it to all of them.
That's great. Now, you should know that this job candidate is interested in the life cycles in the forest.
That's what my research is about.
Yes, I know. That's why I feel it necessary to point out that even though this applicant's research interests are similar to yours, we want you to tell us what you think about the teaching of all these applicants. Your perspective as a student, how the applicant teaches in the classroom. That's what's important to us.
I understand. So how many applicants are there?
Let's see. We have 4, all very good candidates that we'll be looking at over the next few weeks. It's going to be a tough decision, but it'll be a good experience for you, especially if you're going to grad school.
Thank you. It'll be cool to do this. I'll get a copy of the schedule from the secretary on my way out.
You're welcome. See you in class this afternoon.
Listen again to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
I think you know the department is looking to hire a new professor. Are you familiar with our hiring process?
No, but what's that got to do with me?
Why does the student say this?
What's that got to do with me?
Listen to part of a lecture in an environmental science class.
When land gets developed for human use, the landscape changes. We don't see as many types of vegetation, trees, grasses, and so forth. This, in turn, leads to other losses, the loss of animals that once lived there. But these are the obvious changes. But there are also less obvious changes, like the climate. One interesting case of this, of changes in the local land use causing changes in climate, specifically the temperature, is in Florida. Now, what comes to mind when you think of the state of Florida?
Sunshine, beaches,
warm weather, and oranges.
Yes, exactly. Florida has long had a great citrus industry, large orchards of oranges, lemons, and the like. Florida's winter is very mild. The temperature doesn't often go below freezing. But there are some areas of Florida that do freeze. So in the early 1900s, farmers moved even further south in Florida to areas that were even less likely to freeze. Obviously, freezing temperatures are a danger to the crops. A bad bout of cold weather, a long spell of frosts, could ruin a farmer's entire crop. Anyway, before the citrus growers moved south, much of the land in South Florida was what we call wetlands. Wetlands are areas of marshy, swampy land, areas where water covers the soil or is present either at or near the surface of the soil for a large part of the year. Wetlands have their own unique ecosystems with plants and animals with special and interesting adaptations. Very exciting. But it's not what we're talking about today. Where was I?
farmers moved south?
Oh, yes. Farmers moved south. But the land was not suitable for farming. You can't grow oranges in wetlands. So farmers had to transform the wetlands into land suitable for farming. To do that, you have to drain the water from the land, move the water elsewhere, and divert the water sources such as rivers. Hundreds of miles of drainage canals were built in the wetlands. Now, these areas, the new areas the farmers moved to, used to be warm and unlikely to freeze. However, recently the area has become susceptible to freezes, and we're trying to understand why.
Is it some global temperature change or weather pattern, like El Niño or something?
Well, there are two theories. One idea is, as you suggest, that major weather patterns, something like El Niño, are responsible. But the other idea, and this is the one I personally subscribe to, is that the changes in the temperature pattern have been brought about by the loss of the wetlands.
Well, how would loss of wetlands make a difference?
Well, think about what we've been studying so far. We've discussed the impact of landscapes on temperature, right? What effects does a body of water have on an area?
Oh, yeah. Bodies of water tend to absorb the heat during the day, and then they release the heat at night.
Yes, exactly. What you just said is what I want you all to understand. Bodies of water release heat and moisture back into the environment. So places near large bodies of water are generally milder, slightly warmer than those without water. And what I and others think is that the loss of the wetlands has created a situation where the local temperatures in the area are now slightly different, slightly colder than they were 100 years ago before the wetlands were drained.
Do we know what the temperature was like back then?
Well, we were able to estimate this. We have data about South Florida's current landscape, the plant cover, and we were able to reconstruct data about its landscape prior to 1900. Then we entered those data, information about what the landscape looked like before and after the wetlands were drained. We entered the data into a computer weather model. This model can predict temperatures, and when all of the data were entered, an overall cooling trend was predicted by the model.
How much colder does it get now?
Well, actually, the model shows a drop of only a few degrees Celsius. But this is enough to cause dramatic damage to crops. If temperatures overnight are already very close to the freezing point, then this drop of just a few degrees can take the temperature below freezing. And freezing causes frosts, which kill crops. The damaging frosts wouldn't happen if the wetlands were still in existence. Just a tiny temperature difference can have major consequences.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
Wetlands have their own unique ecosystems with plants and animals with special and interesting adaptations. Very exciting. But it's not what we're talking about today. Where was I?
Farmers moved south?
Why does the student say this?
Farmers moved south?
Good job, family. You did it. Only 10% of people make it to the end. So you're so special. Anyway, TOEFL listening is not that simple. So I think you should practice more and more. That's why I made another video to practice for TOEFL listening. So see you in the next video. Take care.